Okay, so we have a lot of different campuses that are represented here, not just your home campus. And the whole idea is that you get to interact with other students and learn from different perspectives. So that's why we include all the different campuses across the Fortis institution. So who do you contact? If you have any issues, start with me.
You going to the classics this year?
And then if I can't help you, you can move up to Dr. Brown, our campus dean. And then, yeah, Dr. Brown's contact information is at the end there for you if you need her. But start with me. If I can't help you, you can go to your campus courses and ask those instructors, your campus dean, and then Dr. Brown. So I am going to be your resource when you need assistance understanding content or completing discussion questions or assignments, quizzes. I'll be your first line. I'm available by phone, email, through Canvas. And then each week we'll go over the lecture content in our live class, and we'll try and get into some Kahoots and some other things that activities that we can do for learning. And then if you fall below a 78% in class, you will hear from me weekly. And we can do, I definitely recommend responding to those emails and reaching out early so that we can get things in place so that you don't fall below that 78% benchmark for the nursing program.
Do you have a do you
Yeah.
have a cell phone number?
Yes, it is in the contact information in the announcements.
Okay.
That is my cell number. Yep. And I'm fine with texting, emailing, phone calls.
Okay.
Just know if you call me, it might get blocked the first time. So leave me a voicemail so I know who you are.
Okay.
Same thing when you text me for the first time, put your name in there so I know who's texting me. Yeah, and you can reach out to me anytime during that. I will tell you that when I'm teaching, my cell phone is typically in do not disturb so that I'm not having it ring while I'm trying to teach you guys. But as long as you send me a message, then I can see the timestamp on it and know that you reached out ahead of class.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. There's my chat. Sorry, I lost my chat here. Okay. There we go. Let's see, just some information on communication. Make sure that you're courteous and positive and respectful. Be cautious about using humorous or emotional statements because they can be misinterpreted. I don't really think there's anything that any of our discussions that would lead you to use those types of statements. Make sure that your comments are relevant, be considerate, make sure that you use proper language and titles, don't use slang, and then make sure not to type in all caps because that gives the impression that you're yelling. Our online courses have specific start and end times. They're scheduled on a specific day and they are mandatory, just like a campus class would be. We can do various different activities throughout our time together. We also have discussion boards that you need to post your initial thought by midnight on Wednesday, and then 2 peer responses by midnight on Sunday. And then the due dates are according to your syllabus. They are set in Pacific time. So if you're on the East Coast, you do have a little bit of extra wiggle room for your deadlines. So we do have a late work policy. You have up to 7 days after the assignment is due, to submit the assignment and get a 10% deduction on your grade. Anything submitted after 8 days will result in a 0 for the assignment. Attendance is recorded during the assigned live session time. So make sure you sign in with your full name. Make sure that you are on camera the whole time and I can see your face. Can't be pointed at the ceiling, can't be pointed in the corner. I need to be able to see your face the whole time. If anyone is at work or in a vehicle during the session, you will be removed and you will not get attendance for the day. Also, anyone not coming on camera after being asked to will be removed from class. Just so you know, if you leave class, you can get back in. But if I remove you from class, then you can't get back in for the rest of the class and you'll miss the entire time. So please make sure that you're on camera, that I can see your face, and that you're not in a vehicle. Even if you are a passenger in a vehicle, it can be distracting to the driver, and therefore Fortis does not allow you to be in a vehicle while you're in class. And then we review your attendance by your login and log out time on Zoom. Attendance is recorded in 15-minute increments. So if you're a minute late for class, you're going to lose 15 minutes. And then anyone without attendance for 14 days in a row will be dropped without notification. So make sure that you are here and you are on time. And there is no makeup for missed attendance. Also, students that miss 20% of their scheduled hours will receive a letter grade drop on their course. So if you miss 20%, your grade goes down an entire letter grade, and may put you at risk for failing or not hitting that 78% benchmark. So attendance is very, very important. Make sure that you communicate with me. If you're going to have a doctor's appointment or anything like that, make sure that you have a doctor's note. Send it to myself and Dr. Brown so that she can approve your absence and make sure that you don't get that 20%. That will result in a full letter grade deduction. So we do record attendance weekly, and the deans do look at that every week. Once you hit 5% of scheduled time absent, you'll receive an email through Campus View. Once you get to 10%, you will be required to meet with myself. And then once you're at 15%, you are required to meet with campus administration. So keys to success. Make sure you're paying attention to your syllabus. You're looking at your due dates. Make sure that you do your reading. The content that we cover is a very high level overview. The information that you need for your quizzes and your exams is going to be in your textbook. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. Do your reading. It will really make things a lot more clear for you. Make sure that you're engaging in class and participating in all of our activities and our discussions. And obviously show up to class. Make sure that when you're completing assignments that you're reading the rubrics. That's how I grade. So it's very cut and dry, tells you exactly what you need to get the full credit for the assignment. Also make sure that you're paying attention to the format to submit your assignments. So if you don't submit your assignment in the correct format, then I'll let you know and I won't grade it, but there's a chance that you won't get credit for it because it wasn't in the correct format. Make sure that you're doing all of your assignments. Your homework grades really can help you if you're on the fence. And then make sure that you are studying for your quizzes and exams. I'm going to try and get study sheets out for your quizzes ahead of time. This first one's going to be a little rushed. But then we have live review sessions for all of your exams. So once we announce those the week before the exam. So plan to attend those because those will really, really help your scores. And we'll talk about those more in a little bit. Keep in contact with your instructor. Make sure you have a reliable internet connection. Make yourself a schedule to make sure that you get your assignments done on time and that you're not missing anything. And then make sure that you have a quiet place where you can focus on class, especially when we're taking exams, things like that. And then read your directions really carefully. It's recommended that you log into class 4 to 5 times a week to stay connected and engaged. Make sure that you review your announcements at least weekly. I post at the end of the week so that you have it Sunday morning when we start a week. And then I post after class. So you'll get your assignments at the beginning of the week. And then after class, I will post the live recording and then any links that I have for you. Make sure that you're submitting all of your assignments the week that they're due, including your discussions. And then at the end of each week, it's a good idea to review and make sure that you've got everything submitted. Don't wait till the last minute to do things because inevitably things come up, technology doesn't work, and then you got yourself in a jam. My contact information is in the announcements. Make sure you save your syllabus so that you can refer to it if you have questions on due dates or anything. And then make sure that you've logged into your textbooks and you have access. Same thing, make sure that you guys have access to your CJ Sims and you can open those before we get to that. We've still got a couple weeks, but make sure that you can get into those. Let me know if you guys have trouble accessing anything so that we can get it squared away before it's due. Make sure that when you come to class that you're prepared to discuss the concepts that are covered in the reading. Attend the additional review sessions that we offer, and then meet with me during office hours to answer any questions that you might have, to review any information that's not clicking for you. I do individual tutoring or group tutoring to help with content and concepts. And then make sure if you're having technical difficulties, you contact technical support or, and then make sure you let me know that you're having technical issues. Weekly review sessions are not mandatory, but they're highly encouraged. Also one-on-one tutoring. I'm available. Just let me know what works with your schedule. We'll figure something out together. I'm happy to meet with you. Happy to meet with you just once at the beginning of the course to lay out a schedule and make a plan. I'm happy to meet with you every week so that we can review and answer any questions that you have. You just have to let me know. Okay, so this is the grading components. So 80% is our key graded assignments. So your quizzes, your exams, and your HESI. And then 20% of your grade is your homework. So that's going to be your discussion questions, your NCLEX questions, CJ Sim, and then your HESI assignment and practice. So to help you guys out, week 1 through 5, the homework scores will be turned off. So that way you can see where you stand on your key graded assignments. On week 6, we'll turn homework scores on so you can see where you're standing overall. And then week 8, we'll turn them back off so that you can see, again, where you stand with your key graded assignments and whether or not you're at risk for failing the class before your HESI. And then we leave the homework scores off until after you finish your HESI exam and remediation. So your combined scores on your quizzes, exams, and HESI have to be above 78 before we give you any credit for homework. So your minimum passing grade is a 78% for successful completion of the course before homework and after homework. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? Okay. Quizzes will be completed during class time. We'll do our quiz first thing in class. They're one attempt. You get 15 minutes for 10 questions, just like exams, and then make sure that you submit your quiz as soon as you're completed. We'll use our break time for everybody to finish the quiz, and then we'll come back and start lecture after the quiz is over. Same thing for exams. We give exams through ExamSoft. You'll log in through the portal and sign in. Everybody will have the same amount of time to take the exam and then make sure that you upload your exam once you're finished, and you'll get your confirmation, and then make sure that you log out of your testing site. You're only allowed one attempt on your exam. You can't stop, pause, or resume. If you're having technical difficulties, stop taking your exam and let me know that you're having technical difficulties. We'll figure out if it's something that we can fix or if we need to have you reschedule for a different time. Your exams are timed to give you practice for your HESI and your boards. So pay attention to the time that you use. Usually not a problem for anyone. Anyone with accommodations needs to notify myself and Dr. Brown at the beginning of the term. Notifications less than 10 days before an exam may not be allowed to be granted in time, or may not be able to be granted in time, sorry. Exams are held during the scheduled class time. The only exception is written approval by faculty copied to the dean. So Dr. Brown is the one that gives us permission to do an exam outside of class time. Like I said, they're at the beginning of class. Exams can be proctored on campus if you give me 72 hours notice. Still has to be done during the scheduled class time, but you can do it on campus if that works better for you. We do have to approve your proctor, which is why we need that 72-hour notice. We proctor on Zoom. You have to be on the camera the entire time. You have to show your photo ID to sign into the exam. And then we have to see your complete testing environment. So we'll have to see a 360 view of your room. And then while you're taking the exam, I have to be able to see your computer as well as yourself. You can't have your ears covered. And then, yeah. Missed exams are held to the late work policy. So if you miss an exam without prior notice, you'll receive a 0 for the exam. An exam missed for personal reasons will result in a late penalty, assuming that you notified me ahead of time. And then exams missed due to an emergency require documentation submitted to myself and Dr. Brown. And then we have to know within 24 hours of the exam. We won't reschedule your exam until we receive your documentation. And then any exam not rescheduled within 7 days of that class will result in a 0. Make sure you contact me ahead of time before the exam if you have any issues that would prevent you from being successful. If you contact me after the exam, then I can't help you. So communication is key to being successful. Make sure you contact me if you have any problems or you just want some additional help. I am here to make this a successful course for you and try and help you in any way that I can. Moving on to homework. Make sure you are planning your time. Review your syllabus. Make sure you're organized. You know when things are due. You give yourself enough time. Make sure you complete your readings. I can't say that enough. And follow instructions. Example of planning and organizing, just taking the information from your syllabus, throwing it on a calendar so that you know when things are due and you know when you allot your time so you have enough time to do things. Late work is not accepted without prior approval. Like we said, 1 to 7 calendar days after the due date is a 10% reduction in your grade. Anything 8 days or more after the due date is a 0. Your NCLEX questions are to help you prepare for both your HESI and your NCLEX. So they're covered throughout each nursing course. Make sure that you're following the instructions. In the module directions, it tells you exactly how to set up the 50 questions, and it tells you how to submit your assignment, what the correct format is. This is one of the assignments that students often submit incorrectly and then don't get credit for. Make sure that you are using your print results and sending me a PDF. So I can't accept a screenshot for your NCLEX questions. I need the PDF report. And if anybody has any trouble with that, then let me know and we can go through that together. Also, make sure that you're setting it up so you get all 50 questions in the content areas that are listed in your module. So your NCLEX questions, once you submit, the score that you submit is the score that you get. So you can do them as many times as you want to get the highest score, and then make sure you're submitting that highest score to me. Make sure that you're using your course text and online resources in your course modules each week. Percentage scores are applied to the total assignment points. Like we said, screenshots are not acceptable for this. So if you have 50 questions and you have 40 of them correct, you get 40 points, which is an 80%. There's no bonus points for doing extra questions. There's no bonus points for getting the most correct. So make sure that what you're submitting is what you want to receive. CJ Sims are relatively new to this class and this program. So there's a link there that tells you how to access your CJ Sims. They should take you 15 to 20 minutes to get through. That's the goal. We want to complete the assignment and submit the screenshot of your completion page for your best score. So again, make sure you're submitting your best score for these. It needs to include your name, the assignment name, the date of completion, and your score. So make sure all of those things are in your screenshot. And then our HESI practice. So you guys have a practices exam and an assignment exam that count toward your homework grade. And then make sure that you're following the click path there for access to that. Remember that only the first attempt at each question counts towards the grade. Case studies and practice exams have to be accessed through the Canvas course module so that your score crosses over. And then remember that, if you access through your Evolve account, it's not accepted. So make sure that you're going through Canvas to get to your practice exam. Those grades transfer into the gradebook automatically, so make sure that you're using the module link. We don't actually have case studies. We just have the assignment and the practice. Remember that we can't accept screenshots for these. And then if you don't go through Canvas, you'll get a 0. We do not have any papers, thankfully. We just have our weekly discussion posts. So make sure that you are, this is just assignments. Okay, we will go back. So make sure that you are clicking on your link for your discussions, and then it'll give you all the details in there about what you need to write about. From there, make sure that you open the grading rubric and you look at what I'm looking for. Ideally, I would like to see at least a paragraph about the topic, and then making sure that we're using APA format to cite our references. That is something that gets missed, and it's easy points. So make sure that you are using APA formatting for your citations. Make sure that your citations are in your initial discussion post. Make sure that you're only using nursing journals. Don't just use a website because it's the first thing that pops up. Make sure you're using scholarly sources. And you have sufficient resources to review and provide the information that you need. They shouldn't be more than 5 years old, and make sure that you research topics such as nursing leadership, things like that. Summarize the key points in your own words. Make sure that you're not copying and pasting from your different resources. I do check your resources. So if I notice that it's verbatim from your source, then you'll get a 0 for the assignment. Make sure that you give your rationale for your argument in your own words. And then give credit for your source. Cite your source in APA format. I will warn you ahead of time, and then like the first couple times, I'll warn you to use your citation, and then you will just get a 0 for that part of the assignment. Back to taking quizzes and exams. Make sure that you are opening them through Canvas. You have the quizzes will be in Canvas. Like I said, the exams go through ExamSoft. If you have technical issues, don't continue. Just stop where you're at and let me know. If you're on campus, you can just raise your hand. If you are online with me, then just put it in the chat and let me know that you are having issues, and we can move to a breakout room and see if we can fix it. If not, we'll reschedule. We can see what happened, where you stopped, where you started, where you got stuck, and how much of the time that you used. We can see how many questions you saw. We won't let you retake for personal issues or running out of time. It has to be a truly technical issue. Specialty exams, that's your HESI. So it's given through ProctorU or on campus. There's only one attempt at your HESI. You will have an assigned date and time for the exam that you have to be there. And it's 20% of your testing grade. So it's a big part of your grade. The benchmark for the exam is 900. So that's the score that you want to get. Remediation is mandatory for everyone in order to get credit for your HESI exam. You have to complete 100% of the remediation time, and it's based on the score that you get. So the time should be spent covering the learning gaps that are identified on the exam. Then they will give you remediation content to cover those gaps. So like I said, dependent on your score will dictate how long you have to do. So if you hit that benchmark of 900 or greater, then you have to do an hour of remediation. But if you score less than 500, then you need to do 12 hours of remediation. And you have 1 week to get those done. So just be prepared.
And do you have one attempt?
Yes.
1 or 2.
Yep. Yeah, so 1 attempt on the HESI. Your remediation, you just have to complete the allotted time. So they'll give you remediation packets, and then you just have to complete the right amount of time.
Correct. And sorry to backtrack, but for the NCLEX questions, is it okay that you accept 225 sets instead of just like a straight 50?
It needs to be 50. Yep.
So you wouldn't accept 225 sets?
Nope, you need to do all 50 at one time. Yep.
Okay.
Like we talked about before, you have to show your photo ID, any type of photo ID. It can be your driver's license or your school badge. You have to be on camera all times. I have to be able to see your face and your computer, your work area. Failure to do that will result in being kicked out of the exam. Okay, that is pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions on the orientation information? We good there? Okay. Let's move over to our class. So you guys have 2.5 hours of class. You guys can have 2 10-minute breaks, or we can power through and you guys can get out early. What is everybody's preference?
Power through.
Power through and get out 20 minutes early?
Power through.
Okay.
Yeah, power through.
We all good with powering through? Like I said, for quizzes and exams, you'll get a little bit of a built-in break when people are finishing. And I'll tell you when to be back for class. But other than that, we will just power through. Okay. Let's move on to our content. So week 1 is all about growth and development. Let's back up. Okay. So our pediatric population are not just little adults. It's really difficult to, kind of hard to get that into people's heads that they are very different. They're not just little adults that we can treat the exact same way. Kids are at a completely different developmental progress than adults are, so they interpret things extremely differently than we do as adults. They have a continuous process of growth. They go through a lot of growth spurts and then they have a plateau. We measure their growth and we observe it, and that is one of the things that we use to determine how they are progressing, if they're hitting their milestones, because they all mature at very different times. So we need to, sorry guys, we need to focus on their developmental milestones as a gauge for their growth. So their care plans look a lot different than adult care plans because we're making sure that they're hitting those milestones and that we're meeting their developmental needs. So very different than adults. We do a lot of data collection. So pediatric patients can't tell us a lot of the things that we're looking for. So we collect a lot of data to determine those things that we are assessing. So we look at their height and weight and we monitor that on a growth chart. We make sure that we're talking to parents about their developmental milestones and making sure that they're doing the things that we expect them to do for their age. And then we adjust our nursing diagnoses to those developmental milestones. We need to offer a lot of guidance and educations to parents and school personnel in how to help these children meet those milestones that we're looking for. So we make sure that we plan our interventions so that we are fostering that growth and development, and we're making sure that our hospital care is age appropriate, and we're letting them be as independent as they can without causing harm, so that we can continue to allow them to grow and develop according to those milestones. So what would be an example of an evaluation for growth and development? What are some of those things that we're looking for?
Motor skills, they're
Motor
like
skills.
they're fine motor skills.
Mm-hmm.
Weight and height.
Weight and height, yep.
Their daily intake.
Yep. What do those things tell us about them?
Their nutrition, like
Yep.
if they're getting the proper nutrition or not, and which would also be evidenced by like their weight.
Exactly. Yep. So we look at their weight and their intake and output to help us determine how they're growing and what their overall nutritional status is. Great job, guys. So some terminology that we need to know. So cephalocaudal means head to toe. Then proximodistal means that we work from the inside out. So understanding the difference between those. So an example of cephalocaudal would be being able to raise our head first before able to raise our head and our chest. So we start at the top and then we gradually gain more control. Proximal distal, if you notice, babies are always in that curled up, hands right into the midline. And then as they get older and they're, a couple months old, you'll notice they like to sprawl out more. So that's that proximal distal. Do those make sense? Okay. Those are terms that you need to know for your quizzes and your exams. So differences between children and adults, height and weight are very different. You'll notice that infants will put on weight really quickly and then they'll grow in length and they lose all that extra pudge. They also have very different metabolic rates. Their metabolism is a lot faster than that of an adult, so they require a lot more calories to be able to continue that rapid growth. They also have different respiratory function, cardiovascular function. All of their body systems are still growing and developing, so they're very different from an adult's because they're immature. And we'll talk about all of those things in depth throughout the course. So we talked about some of those measurements that we take: height, weight, volume, tissue thickness. We also compare the measurements to children of the same age and sex. So we expect all boys that are 6 months old to be in a general certain height and weight. Same thing for girls. We expect all 3-year-old girls to be in the same general height and weight as each other. And that's how we determine those rates of growth and development. So we use growth charts, and that's how we dictate whether or not you're on target, or if we need to look at your nutrition and see ways that we can improve, or if you are being overfed and we need to look at integrating some additional activity. So these are examples of growth charts. So there's a male growth chart and a female growth chart, because like we said, we measure the same age and same sex, because boys and girls grow very differently. We also do a Denver developmental screening test. So this looks at 4 different categories during the first 6 years of life, And we're trying to identify children that can't perform age-appropriate tasks. We're not looking at an intelligence test, we're looking at those skills. There are a lot of factors that are related and dependent on growth and development. So heredity, nationality and race, where they lie in the family, their gender and their environment all dictate or influence their growth and development. So we use what we call a family APGAR to help us share resources that might be helpful to the family. So for partnership, we're talking about communication and the partnership in the family. So how the family comes together to care for the child. Who all's involved? Are there outside of the nuclear family relationships that are really important? We also look at growth and who's responsible for feeding and who's responsible for interacting with the child. We look at affection, so overt and covert emotional interactions among family members. How do they bond? Do mother and infant have a really strong bond together, or does she shy away from her infant? Are there other family members involved? Is it a different family relationship than we would traditionally think of? And then their resolve, which is how they use their resources to prevent and solve problems. So that's the family APGAR. Homelessness affects the child's growth and development. Financial resources are often lacking. They might use their school or their emergency room more frequently for identification of problems. And then we can use community referrals for food, housing, and education, as well as financial assistance. So it's really important that we're assessing the socioeconomic status of the family so that we can implement extra resources as we're able to, so that we can keep them on track for their growth and development. Personality is a result of interactions between biological and environmental heritages. Everybody's personality is unique, and it's a organization of those characteristics that is going to determine your pattern of behavior. That's what your personality is. So we have a lot of developmental theorists, and we are going to look at those in depth. There is a whole separate PowerPoint that we will not have time to cover in class that goes in depth on these theorists. I cannot stress enough the importance of understanding the differences between these theorists. They are on your first exam. They are heavily tested on your first exam. They will make or break you on your first exam. So please have these guys straight. That's why we gave you a whole separate PowerPoint on them. They are also heavily tested on the HESI and the NCLEX. So understanding these guys and keeping them straight is really important for you. So the pattern of growth and development, we're looking at the child's task, how they adjust to the external environment. That's the child's responsibility. We're also looking at the parent's responsibility, which is making sure that they're eliciting those positive responses so that the child feels that their needs are being met and they're able to move through each of these milestones. So that's what everybody is looking at. They just all have their own way of looking at it. So the nursing interventions to promote growth and development are going to be encouraging early touch, feeding, and other practices, making sure that we're educating parents on appropriate behavior and appearance of the newborn, because a lot of times parents are completely unaware of what's normal for a newborn. And it's really, really scary when your child might not be developing at the same rate as somebody else's child. Parents do a lot of comparisons. And if they don't know what to expect, then it can be really difficult for them to adjust. And then making sure that we're identifying gaps in knowledge and understanding. So in infancy, the child's task is to develop trust. That is what they're going for. They're looking for trust. The parents are learning the child's cues and how they need to intervene to determine their needs. So we need to help them to understand how to interpret these cues, making sure that we help them not feel incompetent or helpless, making sure that we let them assert themselves as the parents, not to let grandparents take over control. And then helping them cope with things like colic is really important because that can be really frustrating for a new parent, especially when they're sleep deprived and they're trying to understand their child. And then you have something like colic that comes up and you just have a really grouchy infant all the time where you don't feel like you're making a difference ever. During toddlerhood, we are learning autonomy. We're starting
Hi,
to be
Professor. I have
Yeah.
a question. So if a parent is like has a colic baby and they come in and they're like, I just can't take anymore, like I don't know what to do, like what would you do to like help that parent?
So reminding them that this is temporary. That's a big thing. Letting them know there is an end in sight. Letting them know that it is okay to put the child down, close the door, and walk away. Sometimes parents just need that reassurance that if you are stressed out and you can't take it anymore, please just put the child in a safe place, walk away, give yourself a minute to relax and recoup. We can also teach them interventions like small frequent feeding. Sometimes we'll have them add rice cereal to the feeding so that they sit down in the stomach a little bit longer. So all those nursing interventions that we can do to kind of help alleviate some of those concerns and worries. Providing support, getting additional resources in. If they have another family member that can come in and take, 1 or 2 feedings so they can take a nap. Things like that can make a world of difference to a parent.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah. And we'll talk about those conditions more at length as we go through the different body systems. So we'll really target nursing interventions and things as we go, but a lot of education and reassurance will go a long way with pediatric parents. So moving on to our toddlers, they are learning independence. We are trying to do things on our own. They're starting to accept, parents need to start to accept some of the loss of control as the child is learning to do things on their own, but at the same time, setting limits for safety. So we're helping them determine what limits are appropriate and what things the child can do independently. Preschoolers are going to move into that initiative phase where they're learning to separate from their parents. We need to help parents to learn to let go and allow the child to be independent. And a lot of times this is where preschool comes in handy because they're starting to go off on their own. They're learning to do things on their own, but the parents are still involved and engaged. School age, we're looking at industry. So the parent is accepting the importance of the child's peers. And this is where the child is going to reject the parents a lot. They're going to be more interested in what their peers are thinking and doing, and they'll have a lot more peer influence than concern for what their parents think. A lot of patience is needed during this time. Making sure that we're still making the child do their own work, providing chores for them at an age-appropriate level during this time. As we get into school age, we're also helping parents to set limits and encourage self-discipline, helping the child to get their results from their own efforts. In adolescence, they're establishing their identity, starting to touch into puberty, developing abstract reasoning, starting to think about what they want to do when they grow up, looking at different lifestyles that are available, and then learning how to control their feelings, which is very difficult at that age. So parents need to let the child live their own life and not take control over the child. They're going to be discredited by the teenager. They're going to have differences of opinion, but they still need to respect the child's opinion and guide them to appropriate ways of thinking rather than punishing them. Helping parents adjusting to the changing role and relationship with the child is important as they reach adolescence. And then helping them to expose the child to different career fields and life experiences, helping them navigate life once they're no longer living with the parents. So I'm going to skip the next couple of slides and show you a couple videos about the different theorists, because they do a really good job of explaining the different theorists. So let me pull these up. I think they make a lot more sense than me trying to explain them. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is Erikson. And we only look at the first 5 stages of Erikson, only apply to our pediatric population. So let's look at this one.
Psychosocial development identifies 8 stages which a healthy individual should pass through from birth to death. At each stage, we encounter different needs, ask new questions, and meet people who influence our behavior and learning. Stage 1. Basic trust versus mistrust. As infants, we ask ourselves if we can trust the world, and we wonder if it's safe. We learn that if we can trust someone now, we can also trust others in the future. If we experience fear, we develop doubt and mistrust. The key to our development is our mother. Stage 2. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. In our early childhood, we experience ourselves and discover our body. We ask, is it okay to be me? If we are allowed to discover ourselves, then we develop self-confidence. If we are not, we can develop shame and self-doubt. Both parents now play a major role. Stage 3. Initiative versus guilt. In preschool, we take initiative, try out new things, and learn basic principles like how round things roll. We ask, is it okay for me to do what I do? If we are encouraged, we can follow our interests. If we are held back or told that what we do is silly, we can develop guilt. We are now learning from the entire family. Stage 4. Industry versus inferiority. Now we discover our own interests and realize that we are different from others. We want to show that we can do things right. We ask if we can make it in this world. If we receive recognition from our teachers or peers, we become industrious, which is another word for hard-working. If we get too much negative feedback, we start to feel inferior and lose motivation. Our neighbors and schools now influence us the most. Stage 5. Identity versus role confusion. During adolescence, we learn that we have different social roles. We are friends, students, children, and citizens. Many experience an identity crisis. If our parents now allow us to go out and explore, we can find identity. If they push us to conform to their views, we can face role confusion and feel lost. Key to our learning are our peers and role models. Stage 6. Intimacy versus isolation.
Okay, do we have questions on Erikson? Does that help make it a little bit more clear than just reading it from the textbook?
Yes.
Okay, I struggle with these too, so I thought these videos were really helpful. So we're going to move on to Piaget, and he's going to look at cognitive development.
Argues that we have to conquer 4 stages of cognitive development. First, the sensory motor stage. Second, the pre-operational stage. Third, the concrete operational stage. And fourth, the formal operational stage. Only once we have gone through all the stages, at what age can vary, we are able to reach full human intelligence. 1. The sensory motor stage, ages birth to 2. In the sensory motor stage, we develop through experiences and movement our 5 senses. Our brain wants to see, hear, smell, taste and touch as much as possible. First, we start with simple reflexes, and soon after we develop our first habits. From 4 months old, we become aware of things beyond our own body, and then as we get older, we learn to do things intentionally. A key milestone is the development of working memory, or in Piaget terms, our realization of object permanence. Before that, our mum can show and then hide a teddy, and we would think it's gone. After, we understand that objects continue to exist, even when we can't see them. We start becoming curious about everything. We want to smell flowers, taste food, listen to sounds, and talk to strangers. To explore more, we move. We learn to sit, crawl, stand, walk, and even to run. This increased physical mobility consequently leads to increased cognitive development. But we remain egocentric, meaning we can perceive the world only from our own point of view. 2. The pre-operational stage, ages 2 to 7. Our thinking is mainly categorized through symbolic functions and intuitive thoughts. We have lots of fantasies and believe objects are alive. As we are not able to apply specific cognitive operations, Piaget calls this stage pre-operational. We learn to speak and understand that words, images, and gestures are symbols for something else. When we draw our family, we are not concerned about drawing each person to scale, but rather with their symbolic meanings. We love to play pretend, which allows us to experience something new and learn a lot. At around age 4, most of us become very curious and ask many questions. We want to know everything. We can call it the birth of primitive reasoning. Piaget calls it the intuitive age, because while we realize that we have a vast amount of knowledge, we have no idea how we acquired it. Our thinking in this stage is still pretty egocentric. We think others see the world like we do, and still don't understand that they see it differently. 3. The concrete operational stage, ages 7 to 11. We finally discover logic, and we develop concrete cognitive operations, such as sorting objects in a certain order. One example of this is inductive reasoning, which means that if we see someone eating a cookie, we can draw a conclusion and then make a generalization. And we now get the concept of conservation. We understand that if we pour orange juice from a normal glass to a taller one, the amount stays the same. Our younger sister will pick the taller glass, thinking she gets more. By the same logic, we only now can understand that if 3 plus 5 equals 8, then 8 minus 3 must equal 5. Our brain learns to rearrange our thoughts, to classify and build concrete operational mental structures. For example, we now know that we can reverse an action by doing the opposite. Excited by our new mental abilities, we apply them in conversations, activities, when we learn to write, and in school. As a result, we get to know ourselves better. We begin to understand that our thoughts and feelings are unique and not necessarily those of others. That means that we learn to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. 4. The formal operational stage, age 12 plus. Once we become teenagers, we become formally operational. We now have the ability to think more rationally about abstract concepts and hypothetical events. Our advanced cognitive abilities allow us to understand abstract concepts such as success and failure, love and hate. we form a deeper understanding of our own identity and our morality. We now also think that we understand why people behave the way they behave, and as a result, can become more compassionate. Our brain can now do deductive reasoning, which means we can compare two statements and reach a logical generalization. Our new mental skills allow us to plan our life systematically and prioritize, and we can make assumptions about events that have no necessary relation to reality. We can now also philosophize and just think about thinking itself. Our new sense for our identity now also creates egocentric thoughts, and some start to see an imaginary audience watching them all the time. Piaget believed in lifelong learning, but insisted that the formal operational stage is the final stage of our cognitive development. Jean Piaget's first interests were animals.
Questions about Piaget? Okay. Last one we have is Kohlberg. So this video goes through the 6 stages for Kohlberg. We're really just focused on the big overall, the hang on, let me make sure that the pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. I'm going to let them go through the 6 different stages so that you understand the whole big picture. Okay, so this is going to go a little bit more in depth than we need to, but it'll help you understand where they're coming from.
Lawrence Kohlberg's theory claims that our development of moral reasoning happens in 6 stages. The stages themselves are structured in 3 levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. To understand this better, imagine a conflict at school. There is a fight in the schoolyard. 2 ninth graders are beating up Tom. Those who watch the fight are at different stages of moral development. Let's see what they do and how they justify their behavior. At stage 1, we make moral judgments based on obedience and punishment. Finn's sense of good or bad is directly linked to whether he gets punished or not. Finn sees what is happening to his friend and wants to help, but he doesn't because he is afraid the teacher may punish him if he gets caught fighting. He asks himself, how can I avoid punishment? At stage 2, we are motivated by self-interest. Mary decides to intervene and help Tom. She knows that she might get punished, but she also knows that she could become a victim herself someday. If she helps Tom now, he might help her in the future. She is asking herself, what's in it for me? At stage 3, interpersonal accord and conformity guide our moral judgment. Betty sees the fight and wants to intervene, but when she realizes that all the others are just watching, she decides not to get involved. She wants others to see that she is a good girl who is conforming with the ethics of the community. She asks herself, what do others think of me? At stage 4, we value authority and want to maintain social order. When the teacher sees the group fighting, he immediately steps in and shouts, "Stop! Fighting at school is forbidden." He feels that, above all, it is important to follow the rules, otherwise chaos breaks out. He feels it is his duty to uphold the rules that sustain a functioning society. He asks himself, how can I maintain law and order? At stage 5, we understand rules as a social contract, as opposed to a strict order. Jessie, who watches from afar, is not sure how she feels about this. To her, rules make sense only if they serve the right purpose. Obviously, the school rules prohibit fighting, but maybe Tom deserves to finally learn his lesson. Just yesterday, he punched a young girl from grade 1. She asks herself, does a rule truly serve all members of the community? At stage 6, we are guided by universal ethical principles. All those involved now have to face the headmaster. He first explains the school rules and why they exist. He then clarifies that rules are valid only if they are grounded in justice. The commitment to justice carries with it an obligation to disobey unjust rules. The headmaster's highest moral principle is compassion. He believes that all people should learn to understand each other's viewpoints and that they don't feel alone with their feelings. He asks, what are the abstract ethical principles that serve my understandings of justice? At the pre-conventional level, Finn is driven by fear and Mary by self-interest. Both judge what is right or wrong by the direct consequences they expect for themselves and not by social norms. This form of reasoning is common among children. At the conventional level, Betty responds to peer pressure, and the teacher follows the rules. Their morality is centered around what society regards as right. At this level, the fairness of rules is seldom questioned. It is common to think like this during adolescence and adulthood. At the post-conventional level, Jessie knows that things are complicated because individuals may disobey rules inconsistent with their own morality. The headmaster follows a universal ethical idea, at complete disconnect with what society thinks or the rules say. To him, everything is solved through compassion. The right behavior, in his opinion, is therefore never a means to an end, but always an end in itself. Not every person reaches this level. The American
Okay. Questions about Kohlberg? Did those help?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay, good. I am glad. Those links will be available for you when I post the PowerPoint and the recording so that you can go back and watch those again, because I think they do a way better job than the textbook of explaining. Okay, so moving on to parent teaching. So like I said, education is super important for parents so that they understand their role in helping their child develop, and it allows them to anticipate what's next. So we teach them about challenges and disappointments, also allowing the child to function independently. We help them deal with stress or success and failures, teaching them what are socially acceptable outlets and how to intervene when a child is misbehaving. And then we also teach them how to provide the child with skills and tools that are appropriate for their age. So a lot of that is helping them pick out toys that are age appropriate, or helping them to determine what chores are appropriate for a child their age, how to integrate them into the family. We teach a lot about nutrition. Some families don't consider food a priority, but during this time of rapid growth and development, food is essential to providing nutrition so that they can have an appropriate metabolism so their brain can function. And the obese child might be subject to decreased motor skills and peer rejection. So making sure that we're helping to provide that counseling. We might have to teach parents how to modify their eating habits at home, encouraging exercise and movement, those things that are kind of becoming less and less common in society today. We also help prevent illness through education. In the adult population, it's kind of common practice to restrict fat and cholesterol, but our pediatric patients need this for their central nervous system development. So while it might be common practice for the rest of the family, it would be detrimental to a small child. And then their nutritional needs change based on their illness. So if they're sick, they're going to need more calories. They're also going to be less inclined to want to eat. So encouraging them to allow the child to eat their favorite foods just to get something in them, instead of really focused on, you can only eat this because it's healthy. When we're assessing feeding, if we're seeing symptoms of underfeeding, we're going to see restlessness, crying, and a failure to gain weight. Some symptoms of overfeeding are going to be regurgitation, mild diarrhea, and then too rapid weight gain. So we'll see them at the very top percentiles of their growth chart. Teaching about healthy feeding. High fat diets can cause delayed gastric emptying and abdominal distension. So you'll see a really round, bloated belly if they typically have a high fat diet. Same thing with high carbs. They'll have that abdominal distension. They'll be gassy. They'll have excessive weight gain. Constipation is caused by too much fat or protein, and it's a deficiency in bulk. One thing that you need to remember is not to give whole milk before the first year of life. And then we don't want to do low fat milk until after they're 2, because they need that fat for that central nervous system. So those are 2 things that you need to remember for your quizzes and exams. Children typically can feed themselves by the end of the 2nd year of life, and that's important to develop their independence. Parents can have a lot of anxiety about meal times and allowing the child to feed themselves, but ensuring them that this is normal, this is part of their development, and letting them exercise that independence. Preschool kids are going to like finger foods. They're more vulnerable to protein and calorie deficiencies at this stage. For our school-age child, their attitude towards food is going to be extremely unpredictable. They'll like something one day and then hate it the next. They need protein, calcium, vitamin A, and ascorbic acid, and those tend to be low because of the foods that they will voluntarily eat. Letting them eat sweets will decrease their appetite and give them empty calories. So we want to avoid sweets at this age so that we're making sure that they're getting those key nutrients in the foods that they're eating. They will grow rapidly in adolescence and expend a large amount of energy. We want to put importance on nutritious foods that are appetizing. Fad food diets come into play here, and a lot of fast food just because it's quick and easy and these kids are on the go. So running between school and sports, it's a lot easier to run through the drive-through and grab fast food than it is to make a nutritious meal. So this is one of the things that we need to stress to parents, choosing those nutritious, healthy meals versus the easy. Fatigue is very common in this age group because of their poor diet. So helping them make good food selections will help to minimize the fatigue.
What is fad food? Are you saying
that's
fast
like
food?
That's gonna be like your fad diet. So in high school, kids are always concerned about their body image. So you'll see like, I'm only going to have smoothies because then I won't gain weight, or I'm only going to drink water for 3 days so that I can lose weight so that I can fit into my homecoming dress. Or you'll see in the male population, they'll be concerned about carbs and proteins and fat and building muscle. So it's those kind of altered ways of thinking about food instead of actually looking at the nutritional content.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So childhood obesity has more than doubled in the last 30 years. Our kids that are age 6 to 11 are the ones that are kind of most affected. And it is also related to obesity in adulthood. So if they're obese as a child, they're more likely to be obese as an adult. And that causes long-term health problems like high cholesterol, high blood pressure. It's most often related to a poor diet coupled with inactivity. So sedentary lifestyle and then not eating well. So your basal metabolic index is a percentile that looks at the relationship between your weight and your height. So understanding that calculation is important. You won't necessarily have to do the calculation, but understanding what it's looking at is going to be important. A lot of hospitalized children have poor appetites, depending on their illness or disease. They might refuse food as a way to manipulate their parents. Part of our nursing assessment of the ill child is going to be looking at their teeth, looking to see if they have any lesions in their mouth that might prevent them from eating. Can they eat independently, or do they need assistance? A good measure of the child's stomach capacity is going to be a tablespoon of food for each year of age. So that's a good guide to follow when you're trying to help parents understand what their child's stomach capacity is going to be. We want to avoid sweets and snacks before meals because that's going to decrease their appetite. And then infants that are NPO, so can't have anything to eat or drink, should be provided with a pacifier to meet those developmental needs. So sucking is one of those developmental needs that they have. So giving them a pacifier, even though they're NPO, will help them to self-soothe and will help them with their development. And that is important to remember. We don't want to neglect baby teeth. Just because they fall out doesn't mean that they can't cause problems. They not only serve in the digestive process, but they help with the development of the jaw. So they are still extremely important. Also, if they fall out too early, then it could cause their permanent teeth to be poorly aligned. And then delayed or early eruption of teeth can be indicative of certain endocrine disorders or pathological conditions. So teeth are really important. Like we all know, sticky foods can cause cavities. Sugared foods, dried fruit, soft drinks, cake, candy, all the junk food. We want to recommend snack foods like cheese, milk, sugarless gum, raw vegetables, so that we're getting nutritious foods rather than just junk food. And then brushing our teeth after meals and snacks will help with tooth development. So tooth hygiene begins with the eruption of the first tooth. Brushing before bedtime provides bactericidal effects of the saliva that are decreased during sleep. So making sure that we go to bed with a clean mouth so that we're not at risk for infection or cavities. Fevers are not associated with teething. You need to look for the cause of the fever and not just associate it with teething. I know it's a lot of parents will say that my child has a fever because they're teething, and that may or may not be the case. It's more important to look and make sure there's not another underlying cause for the fever. Toothbrushes should be replaced every 3 months or after a viral illness, and avoid rinsing the bristles in hot water. You don't want to use a closed container to store the toothbrush because that will promote mold and bacteria to grow in that closed environment. And then obviously don't share toothbrushes. So our kiddos, their job is to play. That is their work. Hospital playrooms can be used by children who don't have a communicable disease, so something that can be spread or a draining wound. And then art and art, coloring, playing are all outlets for creative expression. We can also use computer games in older children to encourage creativity. And we need to optimize their play activities that are age appropriate, helping parents select age appropriate and illness appropriate toys are important. So understanding that a child that has asthma probably shouldn't be playing with a stuffed animal that could potentially house those triggers for their asthma. So if that animal happens to be dusty or have a lot of dander in it, it could trigger an asthma attack. So probably not the best choice if your child is hospitalized currently for asthma. So common health problems in this population are asthma, hemophilia, seizure disorders, and bulimia. Those all have an effect on the health of their teeth. So medications can cause tooth decay. They can cause oral bleeding or impaired healing. Decrease in saliva can cause gingival overgrowth. And then if a child is having a lot of vomiting, then the acid from their vomit can cause erosion of their teeth. So those are things to watch for. Looking at our infants, we're going to talk about all their milestones. So these milestones are a general pattern of achievement. So general things that we want them to be able to do. They're also referred to as norms. So during the infant period, we want them to establish a sleep-wake cycle. We want them to smile socially, start drinking from a cup, and they're going to start to experience separation anxiety. When a parent notices that the child suddenly slows down, isn't meeting those milestones, they should be evaluated by a healthcare professional. These are just general vital signs for the pediatric population. You'll notice their pulse and their respirations are a lot faster than adults. Their blood pressure is a lot lower because they don't have the same blood volume as adults do. You will also notice that they have abdominal respirations. So you'll notice they breathe through their belly a lot more as opposed to breathing through their chest. They are in the oral stage of development. So sucking brings comfort and relief for them. So it's important that we hold them during their feedings so they develop that trust instead of mistrust. We allow them sufficient time to suck. Infants on IV fluid should still be given a pacifier so that they can develop those oral skills. Their grasp reflex disappears around 3 months of age. Prehension is when they use their hands and fingers to pick up objects. The parachute reflex is another one to know. So that's the picture there. If you bend them forward at their hips, then they'll throw out their arms and their legs to protect themselves from falling. And then their pincer grasp, where they're using their index finger and thumb to pick up smaller objects, is 1 year of age. So making sure that you know your developmental milestones is going to be important for exams and quizzes. Like we talked about in the video, consistency is important for trust. Infants that are consistently picked up when they cry are going to have fewer crying episodes. They're going to be less aggressive as toddlers because they have that trusting relationship. When an infant shows readiness to learn a task, parents should encourage them to learn. Sensory stimulation is going to be essential for infant development. If they're crying, you need to soothe them. That trusting relationship, same thing. If they're hungry, you don't want to hold off on feeding them because it's not time. You want to go ahead and feed them if they're crying because they're hungry. Infants are going to recognize warmth and affection or the lack of warmth and affection. And that's how they're going to determine who they're going to trust versus who is not trustworthy. No two infants are going to be the same, which is why it's so important for parents not to compare their infant to others. Physical patterns can't be separated from the social patterns, so they all influence each other. And the changes in growth and development are going to be gradual. You're not going to notice anything abrupt. We need to guide parents in the skills that they need to help their child develop, provide appropriate communication, teaching them how to interact with their infant. This is where we're talking about an irritable infant, so those colicky infants. Whether they're irritable or lethargic, we use a lot of the same interventions. So Irritable babies are often difficult to soothe. A lethargic baby might just be completely shut down and sleep to avoid stimulation. So keeping the lights down, keeping noise to a minimum, providing that safe containment will help with that irritable infant. So infants like to be contained and have boundaries so that they know that they're in a safe space. So things you can do as a nurse: sit quietly, don't talk or sing, just sit and be with them. Eliminate as much background noise as you can. Use a soft voice. You want to swaddle them very tightly. Give them those nice tight boundaries so that they feel secure. And then make sure that when you're moving them, you move slowly. You want to move one arm at a time. Avoid anything sudden. And then give that non-nutritive sucking. The picture on the left is the colic carry. So teaching parents that will help a lot, and that helps just to soothe the infant and help them to be at ease a little bit. Also explaining to them periods of unexplained irritability and crying in an otherwise healthy infant. That's what colic is. Knowing that it's temporary and that it will end will be a relief to parents. So a lethargic infant could simply be an overstimulated infant. So we're going to do the exact same things that we do for an irritable infant. Because these babies are just overstimulated, they just need to be brought back to a normal place. When we're looking at sleep patterns, the normal newborn sleep pattern is a 4-hour interval. By 4 to 6 months, they can sleep as long as 8 hours at a time. We want to try and synchronize their circadian rhythm to the family routine. And that is something that is a learned behavior. So it takes practice, it takes time, it's not going to happen overnight. Making sure that we put them back to sleep. So infants have to be alone on their back in a crib to sleep. ABCs are so important for parents to understand. If an infant relies on the parent to soothe them back to sleep, they're going to be a lot more difficult to keep asleep. So they need to learn how to self-soothe. There are things that parents can do to prevent illness. So making sure that they're attending their scheduled doctor's appointments that happen all throughout infancy and toddlerhood, making sure that they get their vaccinations at the appropriate times, providing that education on what to expect, when your next appointment's going to be, when your next vaccines are. Stressing the importance of diaper changes is really important. Some families will let their child sit in a wet or dirty diaper for an extended period so that they don't have to use as many diapers, so that it's not as much of a financial burden, but then you end up with skin breakdowns. So it's kind of a vicious cycle, which is why we need to stress the importance of changing diapers when they're needed. Monitoring their growth, their developmental milestones, looking at their nutritional status. During the physical exam, they'll be seen by a physician at least 5 times during their first year of life. They'll get hearing and vision assessments. They'll have several screening tests. We'll do those growth charts like we talked about. They'll be on an immunization schedule. We'll give them nutritional counseling, and then all that education that we can provide. So our infants with special needs will be referred to early intervention so that we make sure that we can get them back on track and making sure that they're meeting those developmental milestones. We can also give community referrals and then use therapies like speech, occupational therapy. Even though kids aren't necessarily talking, speech also works with their swallowing and their feeding abilities. So even though they're not necessarily talking, they can still intervene or improve and benefit from speech therapy. We need to stress the importance of getting your immunizations and getting them on time. Delays in start can cause increased risk of serious illness or death. And then making sure that the family has accurate records of the immunizations so that we don't get confused or potentially duplicate immunizations if they move. We can start adding solid foods at 6 months of age. That's when the tongue extrusion reflex has completely disappeared. So if you put tongue or food on their tongue, they'll push it out of the front of their mouth. That's the extrusion reflex. Also, their GI tract is mature at 6 months of age so that they can start to digest food. Between 4 and 6 months, their sucking is more mature. They'll start that munching up and down, chewing and chomping. When we're teaching about nutrition, we need to assess the parent's knowledge, see what they already know, where the infant is developmentally, whether they're ready for solid foods. Also the parent-child interaction. So how comfortable is the parent with feeding the infant? What are their educational gaps? And then looking at cultural and ethnic practices. So making sure that we're providing recommendations that fit in with the family's lifestyle. So when we're trying to determine if the diet is adequate, we want to watch for the infant to gain 4 to 7 ounces a week for the first 6 months. They should have at least 6 wet diapers a day, and they should sleep peacefully for several hours after feeding. So those 3 to 4 hour increments after feeding, they should be able to sleep. Human milk is going to be best for infants under 6 months. Formulas that are cow milk based and iron fortified are going to be recommended in the absence of breast milk. And like we said, don't give whole cow's milk until after 1 year of age. So those iron fortified formulas or human milk are going to be best for infants. Prebiotics are non-digestible part of food. They stimulate the growth of the good bacteria in your gut and make sure that it all stays balanced. Probiotics are protective of our GI tract, and we use those to treat diarrhea. For parents that are bottle feeding, they need to make sure to keep an eye on the expiration date. Make sure that they're following instructions on how to mix, store, and feed the formula to the infant. Making sure that they're always using clean containers when they're mixing or storing. Never heat a bottle in a microwave. It's really unreliable and can cause hot spots that burn the infant. And then making sure that we're not saving formula that's left over from a feeding. So the saliva on the nipple of the bottle can travel into the milk and cause breakdown that can lead to diarrhea. So all the bacteria in your mouth goes into the formula, can cause GI distress. When we're adding solid foods, we don't want to introduce a new food if the child doesn't feel well. We might not be able to assess an adverse reaction or an allergy if they're already not feeling well. We start with rice cereal because it's the least likely to cause an allergy. We don't want to mix cereal or baby food in a bottle with formula. 1, that's gross. 2, it's going to be really difficult for them to get out. So they're going to work really hard to try and get all of that out and waste a lot of energy. So the only time that we do rice cereal with formula is for those reflux kids. So certain disease processes. We want to make sure that we only introduce one food at a time in small amounts so that we can watch for those adverse reactions and know which is going to cause it. We also want to avoid things like orange juice, fish, nuts, strawberries, chocolate, egg whites, things that are known allergens. When you're introducing foods, you want to do it before the milk to encourage the child to try the food. As they increase their solid food intake, we'll start decreasing the amount of milk that they're getting to avoid overfeeding. Infants require almost 3 times more calories per kilogram of body weight than adults. So that's where their nutritional needs are a lot different than adults. They need easily digestible fats for growth and development, especially their brain. And then, like we said, by 6 months, they're able to digest food, and especially fats that are present in food. Low-fat diet should be avoided until after they are 2, so they get all that stuff for their brain. We want to encourage breastfeeding as much as humanly possible in the first 6 months. We want to discourage overfeeding and teaching parents the signs of hunger and when the baby has had enough. We want to prevent the early introduction of solid foods. So we want them to get all of that iron fortified formula or breast milk, so that we're making sure that they're getting exactly what they need. When we're looking at weaning, signs of readiness are going to be the infant looking forward to new tastes and textures. They might not want to be held as close when they're feeding. They start biting at the nipple as their teeth are starting to come through. And they're going to imitate their parents and siblings. They're going to want to be reaching for mom's food or dad's food. And we want to make sure that we're starting gradually during the day and then progress to nighttime feedings when we're weaning. We want to avoid additives in foods, making sure that we're picking foods that don't have drugs or hormones that are used. And then making sure that parents know and understand how to read food labels when they're picking out foods for their infant. Talked about that. So our feeding skills, we start developing our feeding skills at 4 to 6 months when our sucking is more mature and we start to develop that munching. So those up and down chomping motions. We can add fruit juices at 5 to 6 months when they start drinking from a cup. Want to avoid orange juice until closer to a year so that you're not at risk for an allergic reaction. We talked about rice cereal being the first food that we offer. We only offer small amounts, so about a teaspoon. And then we want to make sure that when we're feeding the infant, we put it on the back of their tongue so they don't do that extrusion reflex. And then when you're scheduling foods, look at introducing a new food 4 days to 1 week at a time. So same food for 4 days to a week, and then you can introduce a second food. That way you make sure the baby tolerates it. You don't have any allergies, no aversions. Some other safety things, car safety, they need to be in a rear facing car seat until they're 2, and making sure that the weight on the car seat matches the weight of the infant. Making sure that we never leave them unattended on a flat surface and that the crib rails are always up, and that we have protection from stairways and pools. So once they're moving, we gotta keep them out of everything. Helping parents to determine toy safety dependent on their stage of development, making sure there's no small removable parts that can be swallowed. And then advancing their toys as they're learning different skills. These are really good milestones to lock in for your exams and quizzes. Their weight doubles by 6 months and triples by a year. Their head and chest circumference are equal by the first year of age. And the reason that we encourage breast milk for the first 6 months is that's when the maternal iron stores are still being transferred. After 6 months of age, that's when they're kind of on their own for their iron. Their depth perception begins at 9 months of age, and then babies over 4 months can voluntarily roll over. By a year, they should start taking independent steps. And then those primitive reflexes get replaced by voluntary reflexes. So things they do just because for no rhyme or reason, start getting replaced by things that they do intentionally. And then those teeth start coming in at about 6 months. And that is the end of infants. Breathe through to toddlers. So we're looking at kids 1 to 3. They're no longer dependent. They have rapid growth and development that starts to slow down. This is when they hit that autonomy versus shame and doubt. Safety is going to be the parent's priority for them. And then we want to avoid constantly telling them no, letting them make mistakes on their own, as long as it's not going to cause danger to them. We're letting them develop self-control and learning what is socially acceptable. So teaching them how to deal with all of those big feelings that they're having. So what do they need to do when they're angry? What do they need to do when they're sad? And this is when they're also really seeking a schedule. So being able to expect things is really important for them. Their birth weight quadruples by 2.5 years. Their growing starts to slow down. This is when their growth really focuses on their musculoskeletal system. So their bones begin to thicken. Their big round infant bellies start to flatten. They're starting to gain bowel and bladder control. They're still going to be belly breathers, but they'll start to shift into breathing more through their chest. Their teeth will be finished by 2.5 years. Their skin is going to be thicker, more protective for them. And then their stomach capacity is going to change to allow them to move to that 3-meal-a-day schedule. This is when they fall into the sensory motor and cognitive stages of the development. They start to learn memory. Trial and error is how they learn. They're starting to take in their environment. They're able to tolerate longer periods of separation from their parents. They're starting to understand cause and effect and relationships. They start to understand right and wrong. So understanding standards of behavior. And they're going to copy. This is when they're in that copycat stage for everything. During toilet training, they can often have confusion with essential and non-essential body parts. So the first time that they use the toilet, they might panic, thinking that they're flushing part of their body down the toilet instead of being a normal bodily function. So helping parents to anticipate that and be able to explain it to the child. Their speech is going to parallel with their cognitive growth. So their understanding of words is going to exceed what they're actually able to say. They have expressive and repetitive language. They'll respond to tone and facial expressions, and they'll start to show empathy. This is when we start screening for autism. You might see some symptoms as early as 12 months where they're not pointing, they're not doing gestures, so they're not waving, saying bye-bye. If they're not speaking by 16 months, not a single word, or not doing 2-word phrases by 2, or if all of a sudden they lose their language or social skills. We want to make sure that before we jump to autism that we're ruling out other potential causes like lead poisoning, a hearing deficit, neurological disorders, musculoskeletal disorders, or inborn errors of metabolism. During this time, parents need to teach rather than punish. Discipline is going to involve guidance. We need to teach parents how to respond to temper tantrums so that they're not reinforcing the behavior. And then we need to set limits, give timeouts. So the appropriate length of a timeout is 1 minute per year of age. The child is seeking approval, so looking for that positive approach whenever possible so that we can increase their self-confidence. Fear or physical aggression won't foster self-control. It leads to emotional disorders. Once a child learns fear, it's really hard to have them unlearn that. And stress will increase the fear of separation. So if they can't self-console, they're going to have a harder time being separated from their parents. Daily care things, adults should be at eye level when talking to a toddler, so it's less overwhelming for them. They need to have a flexible schedule that's organized around the needs of the whole household. When dressing, we need to put clothes that are easily removed, easily on and easily off. And then preventing sunburns are important in this population. Shoes should be 1/2 inch longer and 1/4 inch wider than the foot. Toddlers need to wear shoes regularly so that they can get used to the posture and starting to develop those walking skills. We start toilet training depending on the child's temperament and the person guiding the toilet training. Most of your anal and urethral sphincters begin allowing voluntary control at 18 to 24 months. So that's typically the earliest that you want to start potty training. We use a potty chair or place the child on the toilet rear facing when they're learning. Bowel training is usually the first attempted as opposed to bladder training. You want to wait until the child is dry for at least 2 hours before you try bladder training. Make sure that healthcare providers, childcare providers are aware of any special words that the child might use for defecation or urination, so that they're aware of their cues when they need to use the bathroom. Nutritional counseling, their caloric need declines to 100 calories per kilo per day. We want to limit their milk intake at this point. They should be getting most of their nutrition from solid foods. Like we talked about, the serving size is a tablespoon of solid food per year of age. So they still have a very small stomach capacity. Food is going to be chopped into fine pieces so that they don't choke. And we're going to offer a variety of foods. Our 2-year-olds are really going to like finger foods. Picky eaters are going to be selective about what they eat, but they're going to maintain their normal growth and development. We start looking at feeding disorders when the child is refusing to eat and they start losing weight and having developmental delays. Daycare is specific to the family's preferences. So their personal preferences, any cultural perspectives that they have, and then financial needs and special needs. The only thing that we need to really emphasize to parents is that the daycare should be state approved so that we know it's a safe environment. Daycare is going to differ for toddlers because they have a shorter attention span. They're going to engage in parallel play as opposed to group play. So 2 children will play next to each other, but completely independently. They won't pay attention to what the child next to them is doing. They're just focused on their own play. And they're going to need a lot of supervision to maintain safety. Everybody's doing their own thing. They're all going to have their own risks. During this time of toddlers, it's important to help the parents to let go. Allow the toddler to interact with their environment outside of the family, in the daycare, in the preschools. It's really difficult for parents to let somebody else raise their kid and not feel guilty about it. So helping them to adjust to that. Injury prevention is extremely important. These kids don't understand that things are out there to get them and hurt them, and they're just exploring. So making sure that we have precautions in place to prevent those injuries. Like we said, we have to be rear facing. Then once they hit their weight requirement, they can turn around. And then making sure that we're using booster seats and following those guidelines on each seat, because each seat is a little bit different in its capabilities. The federal government regulates a lot of the products that are available to prevent injuries. So most child sleepwear is non-flammable, and then our medicine bottles should have child-proof caps on them. They also have limits for maximum temperatures on the water heater, so making sure that the water doesn't go too warm to scald the skin. We want to encourage the use of smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. And then they also dictate the slat space in the infant crib, so how far apart the rungs are so that your child can't get their head caught. And then car seats as well. We need to teach our parents to inspect toys, buy toys that are suitable for their age and skills. That's how they manipulate and understand their environment, start to socialize and explore. They still have that egocentric thinking, so it's all about them. We talked about parallel play. We also need to protect the child from sunbirds, mosquitoes, and other things like that, and child-proof the home. That is it for our toddlers.